Hi, László.
Hello, hello.
How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I think we have to leave in about 5 minutes for everyone to connect. I think we can kick off the webinar. Michelle? László?
Yes, I'm here.
So I think UNWTO will provide a quick introduction. Let's see if we can connect to them. Hello, Michelle.
I can hear him. Like in the background talking, but not to us.
Oh, okay.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we are ready, no?
I am.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar by United Nations World Tourism Organization and the European Travel Commission on exploring health tourism. This webinar aims to provide a better understanding of the growing segment of health tourism and will shed some light on the development and management of this growing segment. This webinar is based on the existing and recently released study by ETC and UNWTO exploring health tourism. And this study is the first attempt by both organizations to provide conceptualization of health tourism and to define the motivations behind travelers looking for health-related services. This webinar will be conducted by Mr. László Puczkó. Dr. Puczkó is the Director of Industry Intelligence of Resources for Leisure Assets and the founder of the Tourism Observatory for Health, Wellness, and Spa by Xellum. László has an extensive experience of more than 20 years in the field of medical, wellness, and spa. And Mr. Puczkó is, of course, the leading author of the study. It's my pleasure to give the floor to Dr. László Puczkó.
Muchas gracias. Michelle, thank you very much. And then also let me welcome everybody who takes part in this webinar, which is a very, very, very special one. I'm more than honored to take part of it, and especially leading it as the representative of the consortium, which is myself and the colleagues from IMDJ. I have to give the credit to them as well. It is a long process, and I think what finally we can present you, and then certainly we have only 30 minutes for presentation, so I invite you to actually find and download the full material. Since we were just going to give you some highlights and teasers and major points of the actual study, since this is one of the very first documents that actually is looking at a topical or a theme in such detail by these two organizations. Since many of you, since I looked at the list of participants, in one way or another, have been taking part this field, either in the medical side or the wellness side or destination side, planning side, regulatory side, spa side, from one of the areas. So obviously, everybody has some sort of understanding of what traveling for health actually is. And as Michelle mentioned, the major interest of the study was to identify what is health, what is medical, what is wellness, what are the categories, what belongs to which product, what belongs to some other products and how we can actually identify and designate these services, since probably all of you have seen coverages, documents, reports about the exponential growth of health or medical or wellness and tourism in whichever form of media, either popular or academic. And I think, and we supported the request, it's very much time to provide a little bit of a structure for our destinations, DMOs, governments, as well as industry, clusters, associations, to help their efforts and their initiatives. The actual content of what we're going to talk about in brief, we introduce you the recommended taxonomy. We look at how health tourism can be categorized, since that would be very much essential if we wanted to have data which is comparable from different countries, but collecting in a similar fashion. Otherwise, we cannot really see the actual traffic, the actual volume, and then the uncertainty in the market would remain. And hopefully, with this new taxonomy, what we recommend, it will be easier for any destination, any statistical office, or any industry representative to actually define their own visitors and their own forms of services. We also look at some key determinants of the market, not all of them, and indicate some supply categories. And as an example, a couple of initiatives from all around the world. And we introduce you to the toolkit that we recommend for any destination would like to do health tourism development. We recommend you to visit this toolkit and follow through the steps, because it's a very complicated field. You need to understand the health market as well as the tourism market. And that's one of the key points of the findings and the recommendations that we see a little bit later. Okay, we need to mention one thing, and then it becomes a language issue or semantic issue. Many of you may use the health terminology for most of the products that we are talking about here, but we need to mention the concept of well-being, which is umbrella terminology for anything to describe how anyone feels satisfied or happy as a person. In certain languages, wellness or well-being may not be separated because the language is structured in a different fashion. And therefore, say in Finland, you have well-being tourism, whereas in other countries you have wellness tourism. So we also looked at all these special characteristics in terms of languages and traditions, because traveling for health certainly is not a new product. Since from the ancient times, people were looking for destinations and services that would improve their health or prevent certain diseases. So it's not a very new thing. How we do it certainly is very new, or at least we have a lot of new developments in this field. So we recommend every destination to consider that well-being is a general state of our travelers as well as the hosts, and traveling as such contributes to that well-being, whatever form of tourism we're talking about. Can it be cultural, MICE, visiting friends and relatives, rural, any of those, or adventure, would contribute to the well-being of the traveler one way or another. So we wouldn't recommend to use the terminology as well-being tourism, because that becomes a tautology, to be honest. So if language permits or permitted, probably that's the recommendation of looking at well-being as something that tourism contributes to, because we are happier, we are more relaxed, we learn something, we appreciate new places and new contacts and life and or families or any other situation. So that's the overarching terminology here. When we look at health tourism as such, and there's been a lot of discussions here with colleagues, I can confirm that, how to define it, or what's the suggestion in terms of categorization of all these services, since again, language reasons and traditionally, or because of academic researches and industry initiatives, we have seen all sorts of definitions and all sorts of categorizations all around. And what the as a final result of this work is the definition that you can see. What we really would like to recommend everybody to separate primary motivations. As you know, the World Tourism Organization suggests that any traveler should be categorized according to his or her primary motivation for a certain trip. When we have mixed motivations, then you still have one which would be considered as primary. So what we understand is that any kind of tourism, which we see here, where the primary motivation is a contribution to either the physical, mental, or spiritual health through either the medical side or the wellness-based activities and services. And the critical issue is that, and for any destination developer, destination manager, or marketer, you need to understand that the primary motivation, as you all know, defines the actual trip, but at the same time, traditions such as visiting thermal baths or trying some healthy local food can take part in many different kinds of tourism. It doesn't have to be health tourism as such. Any other form of tourism can capitalize on the natural, cultural assets, traditions that would belong to any kind of health service, medical service, or wellness service. So the clear distinction here is that anyone whose primary motivation is defining some sort of health, then it would be a health traveler or a health tourist. And obviously, there's a further definition in terms of, or separation in terms of who is who and who is not. Anyone who has a medical interest could be invasive or non-invasive, and anyone who wouldn't know what non-invasive is when you don't have any kind of surgical intervention, and invasive when you actually do, that would fall under the medical side, and non-invasive in that sense, anyone, because I know we have colleagues here are working in medical thermal spas or medical thermal baths, would fall under the medical side as long as they administer medical treatment. If it's just a leisure activity, just inverted commas, that will contribute to the general wellness state of a traveler, and the motivation is to visit all these facilities, and we can talk about wellness tourism as such. We have a quite extensive description of all these terminologies, but at the moment I cannot go into the very details because of the time constraint, but the report will give you great insights in terms of how these products and how these categories can be defined and how they actually look like in various countries. I'm sure probably every one of you would like to hear some numbers or data and how many medical tourists we have, how many wellness tourists we have. This is actually the topic that, again, you will have a lot of numbers in the study, but we cannot actually give you clear figures. Many countries may not consider this field at all, therefore they don't collect information regarding wellness tourists or medical tourists as such, or may look at only those who have surgical interventions, but in certain countries, for example, plastic surgery is not considered as a medical intervention, therefore they don't categorize it and they don't collect data in that sense from medical tourism. So have a look at those differences country by country, and then try to understand how difficult it is and how important it is to have a mutual understanding of this field. Otherwise, we will be comparing apple and pear, and unfortunately, it does not help the industry. However, we have so many destinations, very strong in the field, and we have so many destinations have great assets culturally or naturally, or even based on technology. So I invite you to look at the fine details. In terms of how everything comes together, this is what we would recommend. The well-being is all around, so any kind of travel can contribute to our travelers' well-being. And now we're talking about the health tourism side, where we have the medical tourists, the wellness tourists. Yes, in certain countries we have something which is a combination of both, and that exists in Germany or in certain other European countries, but also in North America. and that has a more strict wellness proposition supervised by medical professionals. And yes, we have again, a lot of countries where holism or spirituality is very strong. I'm not just mentioning India, but also Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and also a couple of Central American countries, especially even small destinations, cities or regions where the holistic approach is very strong. We know that certain markets, German market, Dutch market, certain North American markets, the UK market is very much interested in anything related to holism and spirituality. We don't necessarily recommend to create other forms of tourism in that sense, but we need to register that these forms of tourism, these form assets would contribute to any destination development or brand. If you go to ITB next week, you will see that Kerala, as well as the state of India, itself is very, very strong in terms of positioning itself as a holistic destination in the field. We also recommend you to look at how health tourism compares to or related to health services. Since we will have a lot of destinations where recreational leisure time consumers will visit a thermal bath or visit a mountain resort just because it's local, it's interesting, they're around, and they look at it as a natural asset, I look at it as a local interesting site, but they wouldn't consider themselves as health tourists or medical tourists or wellness tourists. So the recommendation is to please look at all these categories and be very realistic about what you have right now, what services you have right now, what kind of tourists you can have, and how you can introduce all those assets and values and traditions and heritage or services that can contribute to our guests' general well-being or even health, depending on what we're talking about. Tourists to come off from cruises in Turkey intended sometimes to visit a hospital, to have a medical checkup, or to have a visit to the dentistry. But they hadn't planned to visit a dentistry before they left, but they arrived and they saw a good offer, and they take this on and they take these kind of health services. But here is the example that we wouldn't consider them as health tourists, but we would consider them as visitors who have some sort of medical spending, wellness spending, or health spending, if you wish. And obviously, health destinations would like to say health tourists who have a very direct and very clear objective of, yes, I want to come, I want to take on some services, I want to have an operation, I want to have a surgical intervention, or I want to just relax, I want to switch off, I want to have a digital detox as a service because I was exposed to too much technology recently. These people are the core health tourism clients, but you shouldn't forget that we have a lot of other guests, potential guests in particular, who would find all services, let it be natural, let it be cultural, let it be technology-based, who would really benefit from it, and you need to introduce it in a different fashion, not necessarily as a health service. That's why when I will talk about the planning process or the management process, you would need to really look at what is comparable to you, and not just look at the international destinations that are specifically targeting medical tourists or wellness tourists. When we look at supply, and just indicating a couple of the options here, not all of it, because we have a lot of different types. Obviously, many of these could be very straightforward for you, but don't forget that now we have cruises that are specifically operated as wellness cruises. We have cruises where you have light operations, not major interventions, but cosmetic interventions or dentistry. And also we have healthy hotels, which are giving you options of healthy services, let it be food, let it be leisure, let it be sport. And we can see what H2H stands for is the merge between hospitality and healthcare, where we would like to see that the hospitality practices are implemented into healthcare provision. let it be a hospital, for example. And again, we have a lot of places nowadays, especially in Asia or in the Middle East, and also in Central America, where they designate cities, villages, geographical areas, specifically for health reasons and health motivation. I'm just giving you a couple of highlights here because the market determinants is a very long list and it's rather complicated because it's politically defined and culturally defined. And just one of the examples here I would like to mention is either the work-life balance or the mental health, which, for example, in the European Union is one of the priorities in terms of public health. How services, for example, can contribute to the mental health of the visitors or the society if we don't talk about mental health care as a medical institution. And also urbanization, people want to take on trips to nature and address the nature deficit disorder. That's what Estonia, Finland, for example, is building on quite strongly, but they don't necessarily call it health tourism as such, but they understand that the market now shows various indications where they can provide services for. And people are lacking access to green spaces, and certain countries can use that as a health-oriented service. If you want to look at anything, let's say, what the political environment has to do with health tourism, the working and the leisure time and the balance of it, the healthcare system. Certain countries do have supported holidays when governments or initiatives, companies, trade unions provide funding or any other form of support for the employees to recuperate, to relax. And that's also a form of health motivation here. And we also should mention the cross-border patient mobility, especially based on the initiative, the decree, the European Union, where patients can go to different countries and acquire services at their home institution in terms of healthcare can provide funding for that. So we have a lot of different initiatives here, bilateral agreements between countries where they send patients to another country because the services, the medical services are available in the third country. So any destination looking at health tourism development would need to look at all the aspects of the market determinants, not just the two that I just quickly mentioned here, the socio-cultural, environmental, and political environment, but also the technology, ICT solutions, the blockchain solutions, the electronic medical data, e-health, m-health, how they influence international travel for health motivation. I would like to mention a couple of very different but still very exciting initiatives from all around the world, such as the Dubai Health Experience. As you probably already know, Dubai has positioned itself as a major healthcare hub, and they have this solution which provides prospective patients as well as patients with the necessary support and also communication activities. Even you can have it as an app, so something to look at. Or MHTC, the Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council, which has amazing facilities, structures, information, welcome booths at the airport, all facilitating the incoming medical travelers, or the efforts of KIDI and Korea, where they're working together with the KTO, the Korean Tourism Organization, to establish Korea as a major, at the moment, medical tourism hub, or especially the Far East or Central Asia. In a different level, we need to mention, for example, the Corner Health, which is a local initiative bringing under the same umbrella hotels, hospitals, university, thermal facilities, various elements of the supply that you have seen earlier, and creating a local brand and creating local value propositioning or regional value propositioning to one part of Croatia. Something similar in Austria, as we can say in the cluster wellness Tyrol. It's from Tyrol, where the wellness providers, wellness hotels, thermal spas, thermal facilities join together with the destination management organization to establish the brand and support the operation of the facilities as well as the brand awareness as a destination. or the Greek Medical Tourism Council, which is supporting the hospitals primarily to have incoming medical tourists to Greece. Another initiative is Ibiza and Wellness, which is an NGO where we would like to extend the brand of Ibiza. I believe many of you know what kind of brand Ibiza typically has, and they want to introduce to the market that Ibiza has way more to offer, and the destination can expand in terms of brand proposition and service portfolio, and how that can happen. For Spain Cares, which is a national initiative from Spain, creating an umbrella, the government taking part one way or another in this initiative, as well as industry, hospitals, hotels, terminal facilities, clinics, research institutions, how they can create a new brand propositioning and service portfolio for Spain, or even Berlin as a city, how they can create health excellence and a brand that supports the hospitals and the clinics primarily, and make Berlin not just a cosmopolitan city, but also a major destination for anyone who is interested in high quality healthcare. There are lots of examples in the report as well, because it is a very changing environment. So you can see a wide range of examples, and could have mentioned the Medellin Medical City from Colombia, for example, which again targeting primarily North American patients or Central American patients. We have a lot of examples, so have a look and try to find the one which is the most relevant to your case. Either you are a facility or a destination or a national body, because I see that we have a couple of national bodies in the list as well. When anyone would like to do any planning, I'm just giving you really the highlights because my time is running out, and then I have only 2 more minutes left. This is really just the highlight here. It can take up to 36 months, if not longer, if anybody would like to do a proper planning process in terms of positioning and branding and implementation and monitoring. And if you take any advice from here, take very serious the inventory and do real check and be honest to yourself what you can do. Not everybody has to be active in health tourism, medical or wellness tourism. Sometimes it's enough to just include certain services into any other kind of tourism. And also please implement, and monitoring is essential, because we have seen cluster studies and association studies that associations will have a short lifespan because they don't necessarily see the results of the work because the monitoring wasn't put in place in the very beginning. So it's a special chapter in the report. It's a whole toolkit, stage by stage, line by line, actor by actor, activity by activity. So anybody wants to do anything in health tourism development, I really recommend to just go through, and then you have a proper checklist of what you have to do. So as a take-home messages, what I would like to highlight here, just a couple of points, not many. So don't be worried if you have culture and religious differences. As we all know, in tourism, that's a great thing. What you have to be careful about is how to introduce it to prospective guests, because anyone who, for example, would like to have a spa and comes from North America and comes to Europe, and it goes to any of the Eastern European thermal facilities, they expect a 5-star luxury hotel kind of spa, whereas often they see a large scale, not luxury, but a good quality, but not luxury thermal facility with murky, smelly waters. And obviously they might get disappointed. It's not their fault, but more likely never made our homework and never did the necessary studies in terms of what vocabulary we have to use. Do consider, if you're a governmental body, regulatory and ethical issues, since especially healthcare data is ultra sensitive, and therefore regulatory measures would need to be in place. Otherwise, medical tourists take it as a risk and they may go somewhere else. Domestically, we certainly have I'm echoing, yes, no, not now. Domestically, many countries have very strong domestic health tourism, and please consider it as a major form of travel. It doesn't have to be international. Many countries do amazingly in domestic health travel. Any natural healing effort or cultural healing effort will become very, 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 and very attractive, because we know from data, you will find a lot of market data. People would like to have something which is natural, something which is local, and it has a healing effect. So any countries that have this kind of assets, they will see a great demand growing in that sense. You need to provide industry with knowledge sharing and guidance because of the uncertainties in terms of definitions, in terms of market presence, in terms of data. So please help industry as well as governments, local governments and clusters and associations, because we can find all sorts of information around the web, not all of this which is justified, and providing any structure, and that's what this study actually wants to do, provide a framework and the support, background information and approach will certainly help, because destinations have great assets in this field. And last point, hope that the recommended taxonomy as well as approach will help to know more of what you are doing and what you can do in terms of data, in terms of product development. Look at how services can complement other forms of tourism, and don't forget that we need to really have people in the field who understand tourism and health at the same time, because they are very, very different fields in certain senses. And also don't forget that medical professionals, for example, speak a different language than that of tourism professionals. So you need people who understand both sides, otherwise your great assets may not be used up to their potential because of the differences in the field. So I believe this is a great opportunity here. Many, many countries and destinations and local areas could benefit from the interest that the general market has, not just those who are specifically looking for medical or wellness services, but also who are visiting destinations and would like to learn from people how they live, what they do, how they keep their happiness, how they keep their health. And this is the time to introduce a lot of small-scale services and service providers. And I think this material will help you to understand how that can be done, and looking at great examples how it has been done so far in various parts of the world. And feel free to visit it, and feel free to give us feedback. And obviously you can contact any of us in this field, and we will be more than happy to provide you feedback and answers. But I think I need to pass it on to Jennifer from ETC. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, László. Thank you very much for what I see as a very insightful presentation. It's very interesting to see actually the strong implications of the change in environment on health tourism, not to talk about the huge diversity of from the supply side. And on the other hand, I believe there is still a lot of work to do in terms of establishing a mutual understanding across the industry, and also in the sense of having comparable data to establish a common terminology. So now I would like to give the floor to all participants to ask any question. Feel free to include your questions also in the chat box, which we'll read out loud. And I would like to start with the first question myself. So László, what do you think are or would be the 2 or 3 initial steps to be in the right direction for a common taxonomy?
What I would do is to do a reality check and assessment of what destinations actually have and how they are introducing it. Is it going to be something which is very medical? Is it going to be something which is very natural? What are the language differences country by country? What they mean under those terminologies? And then when we have that map, then we can really apply what the recommended terminology or taxonomy suggests and have those common grounds that will help not just the developers and managers, but also the service providers as well as the future guests. since they need to understand who does what. I think we have to be careful not to squeeze too many different services and too many different kinds of tourism under the health tourism umbrella or wellness tourism, medical tourism umbrella, because it doesn't necessarily help. Because people do have very clear understanding, especially the core travelers, what they want to have, and then everything becomes everything. Then I don't think that helps neither communication or management or even satisfaction.
Thank you. So I see one question on the chat box. So in country like India, there is not much difference between medical tourism and wellness tourism. So the question essentially is, how can one define medical tourism for his research proposal?
I think the person who asked this question probably is referring to Ayurveda, which is certainly in a local context, and also in a medical context, is either medical or wellness or both. Obviously, that's something that India or even Sri Lanka has something to do with. But to external demand, medical most of the time is based on something which is hospital or clinic based activity or invasive. Ayurveda obviously is it's a non-invasive approach and not just a medical study. It's a lifestyle. It's a life concept as such. Therefore, introducing this to guests, sometimes it would need to be as wellness because they just try it. Sometimes it can be as a medical intervention. And on top of that, you have the invasive medical interventions in which, again, India has great resources and hospitals. So I would separate the evidence-based medicine, which we call certain kind of approaches, such as Ayurveda, from the medical interventions, which are invasive.
Great. Are there any more questions? So there's another one. So there are a lot of events relating to medical tourism and wellness, I suppose. So do you have any particular recommendations as to which would be the key events to attend for wellness tourism?
Again, it's a very good question, and the person really addresses one of the key issues here. We have really a lot of events from really all around the world that are labeled as either medical tourism events or wellness tourism events. I believe the person who asked this question would need to decide what his or her actual interests in the field. If it's just get general knowledge or just have a bit of a insight in terms of what's happening in a certain market, I'm more than happy to suggest or recommend certain events. If the person wants to have the contemporary, latest data, even arguments about what's happening and what's not, that may be a different list of events. I don't necessarily want to mention just one or two because that wouldn't be fair, not knowing where the question is coming from geographically. Because you have certain events in North America, even South America, you have now in Africa, you have in Europe, you have in Asia. So it very much depends on what the motivations are. But again, in the material, we have recommendations in terms of events, or at least categorization of what anybody can look for. But if the person cares to send a mail, I'm very happy to direct him or her into a certain event or a certain set of events that can be practical or even useful for the person.
I think the contact details are in the last slide. Is this correct?
Yes, I'm showing those.
Okay. And we have one more question which I think was sort of addressed already. So who defines the terms universally? And how can one create or adopt a particular definition in the research proposal? So the tourism industry inbound with too many definitions for the same thing. So I suppose this comes again to the diversity of the taxonomy.
Yes, and also we shouldn't forget that any statistical phase tourism authorization in terms of defining what is what and what is not, tourism authority, national tourist office, destination management organization would collect information about their visitors, and one of the first questions is, why are you coming here? And then you would need to categorize accordingly. And yes, it's a certain generalization. You might even say that it's not just certain, it's a sizable amount of generalization has been taking place. But to provide any kind of terminology, we had to be general because of the cultural and natural and national differences. And yes, you might say that this is, I can define certain terminologies as I wish. Yes, the person is quite right. But since the WTO is the United Nations Specialized Agency to help governments and their industry to understand how tourism is happening and what are the latest issues and what are the latest initiatives and opportunities, I believe the recommended terminology can be something that we use as universal. And also don't forget the relevant body, the Competitiveness Committee of the WTO, approved these terminologies back in 2017. So it's been recommended to every partner government under WTO to please consider it as something that you can use in your own country, or at least something that will be influenced by these terminologies.
Thank you, László. I think we are running out of time. There are still a few questions that I would like to invite the participants to send directly to László. If you can please change the slide so we can see the contact details.
It's on it. That's the last slide I'm showing. I don't know what you can see.
Can you see the contact details?
Yes.
Okay, the slide I can see is the one on key findings and recommendations.
Really?
Yes.
How about now?
No, not yet.
I'm sorry, I can see the contact details. Sorry about that. I don't know what's happening
here. It's fine. In any case, we will send, so just to remind everyone, we will share the webinar slides and the recording with all registered participants. And just to finalize, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you to the team from UNWTO, and thank you once again, László, for the presentation.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome, and I hope we could help your work as participants in terms of your health tourism development.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.